Good morning, everybody. I realize people are still joining, but we need to get started and try to keep on time. We have a very full agenda today. The topic today is very much focused on public health as well as the reopening of the school systems. We will talk a little bit about the land use code, but we chose this agenda today because the Protect Your Neighbor is so critical to the economic health and our ability to stay open. So we have a speaker from San Juan Public Health, and hopefully Brian Devine, and hopefully Michael Murphy from Centura Mercy Medical Center will be able to join us as well. We've seen a resurgence of the virus in the last few weeks. 47 of 50 states are now exhibiting an upward trend, including Colorado. And in the week of July 6th, Governor Polis implemented the Protect Your Neighbor, which is phase 3 of reopening. Different communities under that specific executive order will have different phases based on their local conditions and capabilities. And that will really be based off of 8 metrics that are summarized in 3 categories of treatment, test and trace, and transmission. And this will allow us to open up incrementally over time based on how well we're doing within those specific metrics. So obviously this is very critical for us as a local community, and how we enable that is very important, so we'll focus on that today. Overall, unemployment continues to show a positive downward trend. This is for the 12th week in a row after its peak. But there are closures now and pullbacks in California, Arizona, and Texas, and this could reverse that positive trend, and we could see an increase in unemployment moving forward. In terms of the land use code, so quickly shifting gears, the Alliance stood up a review committee made up of members, and we submitted comments for the first draft that was due June 26th. The next draft comments are due July 24th. We will have comments submitted for that as well. Chuck Stevens, our county manager, will go into a little bit of detail on the status of the land use code today and talk about the ability for everybody to participate. We now have the ability to do in-person meetings, so folks that did not have the ability to participate via Zoom now have the ability to go in person and participate in those meetings. I'm not going to go into detail here on the executive director report. We will publish a newsletter this week with a little bit more depth on content, but I will just highlight a couple of things. The land use code, which we just mentioned. We'll also publish a revised budget for second half 2020 and identify some strategic initiatives for that second half. The one other thing I'd like to mention, and it's there on the last line to Protect Your Neighbor, we have secured some PPE that is available on Southwest CODA, swcoda.org, and that includes face masks and hand sanitizer. It's a first come, first serve. We were able to procure about $10,000 worth of PPE via financing from the Community Foundation, so thank you, Brigham, for enabling us to do that. And we'll pass on those savings to the business community. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Brian Devine from San Juan Basin Public Health. Brian, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian. I'm the Environmental Health Director at San Juan Basin Public Health, and I'm this week the Incident Commander for our COVID-19 response. Many of you have met Leanne Jalon, who's my boss and our normal Incident Commander. She is taking some well-deserved days off. So this week, you're all stuck with me. as your presenter. Next slide, please, Mike. I know you all know who we are. We've presented to you before, but I just want to give a brief reminder. And for those of you who haven't heard from us before in these meetings, we are your local public health agency. We are responsible for, among other things, disease investigation and control in La Plata County, as well as in Archuleta County. So we've been tracking this pandemic since late February. Our primary strategy is casually known as boxing it in. This is a disease containment strategy that involves widespread availability of testing, isolating and quarantining those who have been exposed to the virus, tracing their contacts to attempt to reduce the spread. And then our secondary strategies are assisting our healthcare system. We've had healthcare providing testing. We have widespread availability of testing at healthcare in our community, which is great. We've been supporting that effort with PPE as well as with testing kits and some logistical support. Of course, communications is one of our major roles. Communications are disease control. People have to know how to protect themselves and what the status of the virus is in the community. We've also had a strong emphasis on disease mitigation. Mitigation is the activities that reduce spread throughout the community, especially at workplaces. So we've created a self-certification process for businesses in La Plata County. Prior to reopening, they complete a self-certification checklist with us to make sure that they're understanding properly and implementing properly their new infection control responsibilities that are found in state public health orders. Next slide, please. As part of our communications effort, and since I'm not going to have a ton of time today to go into all of our statistics, I just encourage you all to visit our website, sjbpublichealth.org/coronavirus. You'll see a blue button there, which is our data dashboard. And if you scroll down on that page, you'll see guidance and information for all types of different sectors. As far as our data, this is as of noon yesterday. We had 145 cases in La Plata County. I know we had a couple more overnight, so we'll be reporting, I think, 148 as of noon today. You can see we've performed over 9,000 total tests in La Plata County. Over 6,000 of those were tests for active infection, as well as about 3,000 tests for antibodies. The data dashboard also reports some other stuff that you see on the bottom left of this slide. We have 2 outbreaks. Actually, can you go back? Yeah, just one second. Just want to explain what all these things mean. So we have 2 outbreaks. One of those is active, one is closed. An outbreak is just 2 or more cases identified at a workplace. And in fact, our active outbreak only has 2 cases, and we don't expect that there's going to be any others. So it's a little weird to call it an outbreak, but it does meet the definition. We also track recoveries. This is persons recovered from the virus. Hospitalizations, this is total hospitalizations, not active. And then we're also reporting, as of last week, cases in non-residents. We are seeing a significant increase in the number of cases that make their way to us, that are getting tested in the community usually, but actually are not residents. Next slide, please. Just a graph of what we're dealing with. As you heard Mike say, there's been a resurgence of cases around the country. Southwest Colorado has not escaped that. As you can see, the purple line, we were flattening out pretty much until the 3rd week of June. And then in the last couple of weeks, we've had sustained growth. We have not seen the exponential growth that's been seen in Arizona, Texas, Florida, and Southern California, but we have seen sustained growth in Southwest Colorado as well as in many other regions of Colorado. Next slide, please. This is a graph from Johns Hopkins University. Red is unfavorable, green is favorable. As you can see, there's not a lot of green on the map here as far as sustained declines in cases. This is as of July 10th. I checked this again last night, and there's really not much improvement there. Just about everywhere in the country, we're seeing either sustained or exponential growth in cases of COVID-19. Next slide. I did have a question come in last week about face coverings. We do communications on face coverings all the time. We do have a face covering advisory in effect for La Plata County, as well as a face covering order that applies to certain categories of businesses for their employees I'm sure we all know that the city of Durango has a face covering order that also applies to the general public. Face coverings have been shown repeatedly to be one of several tools that's crucial for ongoing prevention of transmission of disease. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't mean we can't do the other things like testing and contact tracing, but the National Academy of Sciences does say that face covering in public corresponds to the most effective means to prevent transmission. So we continue to do communications on that. I now want to spend the end of my presentation talking about Protect Our Neighbors. As Mike said, it is the governor's third phase of reopening the state. Protect Our Neighbors follows the current safer at home period. And of course, the first one was the stay at home, the statewide stay at home order. Protect Our Neighbors is an effort to tie the restrictions on business activity and social activity to local data as opposed to taking a statewide approach. It's an opportunity for us to all work together to have good disease control practices in our community and good healthcare practices in our community and healthcare capacity, such that we can be comfortable and have it be appropriate to have additional community activities open to the public. So the basic categories here, as you can see, are low prevalence of the virus, healthcare capacity, and public health capacity. And I'll talk a little bit more of those on the next slide. The metrics, as Mike mentioned, there are 8 of them. I don't want to spend a ton of time defining each metric and saying what our current statistics are, because as you saw earlier in the presentation, our statistics change very quickly. We probably would have qualified for Protect Our Neighbors here in La Plata County if we had the opportunity to do so 4 or 5 weeks ago. As of right now, we certainly don't because of a variety of reasons. But in general, Protect Our Neighbors metrics are representative of the public health practices needed to contain disease, as well as to respond to outbreaks. So we need sufficient hospital bed capacity, PPE supply, and testing capacity in our healthcare system. As I said, we have done a really excellent job of this. I would say all the businesses on this call owe a local gift card to the staff and leadership at Mercy Regional Medical Center for doing an excellent job of managing their caseload, as well as providing community testing in a partnership with us and with the state. But that's not going to be enough forever. We do see a sizable increase in demand for testing, and it's starting to catch up to the increased supply that we've been able to provide here in the community. We're also noting a slight increase in hospitalizations. And this is in part because of what's going on around the country. There's a demand for testing in states that are in much worse situations than we are, and there's demand for PPE in those states. Colorado is not an island in how we're fighting this disease. Some other metrics, of course, around transmission. We need to see stable or declining cases of hospitalizations, as well as fewer cases overall, stable and declining cases overall, and low incidence, low transmission in the community. As you see right now, we're in sustained growth. And then we have to talk about our public health capacity, of course. We have to be able to implement the standard case investigation and contact tracing protocol for the vast majority of our cases. Right now, San Juan Basin Public Health is able to do that. We're one of the few local public health agencies in the country that's consistently offered 100% case investigation. But right now we're being hampered in part by delays in testing. You know, if you start a case investigation 10 to 12 days after somebody gets tested, it obviously has a much lower utility. We also have to be able to surge our case investigation and contact tracing. We have a plan for that. And we are already offering testing. As I mentioned, we have widespread testing availability. So we are offering testing to close contacts associated with outbreaks. The final stage of qualifying for Protect Our Neighbors is a mitigation plan, which is essentially once you qualify, you have to have a plan that has broad agreement among leaders in the community for what's going to happen if those metrics change. And as you've seen in our slides, the metrics can change quite quickly. Sometimes they change because of things that have nothing to do with what's going on in your local community. What happens in Denver, what happens in Phoenix, what happens in Texas, all of this will affect what our metrics are, what our progress toward meeting those metrics are. So what we need as part of this mitigation plan, if we're interested in this protect our neighbor status and the wider permissions on community activity, is widespread agreement on how to comply with the guidelines, widespread agreement on how we will increase the wearing of face coverings in public settings, and widespread agreement on how we're going to increase the uptake of the influenza vaccine. It's a concern for all of us that as we approach flu season, there could be peaks in COVID-19 and influenza virus at the same time. That could be really detrimental to our healthcare system. So as you can see, these kinds of plans need widespread agreement from elected officials, the hospital system, law enforcement, and our tribal partners. That's a lot of information to give you guys all in 10 minutes. I appreciate you listening, and I'll be happy to take questions. I'm not sure whether we decided we would do questions now or at the end, but I'll be here for the rest of the meeting.
Brian, thank you. What we'll do is, and we saw a question already come in. If you have a question for either Brian or any of our panelists, including Michael Murphy, who will speak next, just please tap your question into the Q&A, and then our panelists can open up that Q&A and type in those answers, and everybody has visibility to that. Brian, just a quick question. What do you think the one thing that that our business community can do to participate in Protect Your Neighbor and get to a point where we have are really kind of controlling our own destiny, if you will?
That's a great question. I see the business community's role as on the mitigation side of things. You know, you're in control of what happens in your own business, what happens with your workforce when they're at work. Face covering, proper separation of employees, physical separation, cleaning and hand sanitizing, asking good practices of your customers, even requiring good practices of your customers. All of these really do go a long way to reducing transmission and helping us meet the transmission metrics that I talked about in the presentation.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce Michael Murphy. Michael, thank you for being with us today. I think you want to go ahead and share your desktop.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. Let me share that. And okay, you should see my screen.
No, not yet.
Okay, I've got it up. Is there something on your end in terms of not seeing it?
Okay, would you try to reinitialize it, Mike?
Sure.
There you go.
There you go.
I saw it really well. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Happy to walk through what we've been tracking through the last 3 months here in terms of the COVID update. And we review this and do this in partnership with all the other health agencies throughout the community in partnership with San Juan Basin Health Department and Brian and his team. So you'll see some overlap on what we're tracking, what we're looking at on a daily basis, but something more, a little more specific to the hospital and what the hospital follows. So let me start out by just saying that in terms of our testing, we've been very successful of increasing the per test per thousand. We're running about 97.5, and as you can see on this slide, overall, the Southwest Colorado overall has rapidly increased that testing over the last several months, and we continue to do that. We are finding now, though, that there is a capacity challenge throughout the state and nationally, but particularly throughout the state in terms of the test results. We were in about the 24 to 48 hour period. We're now moving more towards 3 to 5 days, and in some cases higher than that because the testing centers are actually becoming overloaded, if you will. But we're continuing to work on that turnaround time and try to keep it down closer to that 48 hours. When you look at the total number of confirmed cases, we're north of 37,000 cases. I believe now as of today, this data is as of the close of yesterday, as a matter of fact. So we are seeing a total number of cases continue to rise, as Brian mentioned. When we look at the rate of increase over the past 7 days, that's the more concerning number. And we were in the previous week tracking at 251 new cases per day, but in the last 7 days, our average has increased to 410 cases a day. And so that's the alarming piece that we continue to keep a close eye on. The other thing we do is we've tracked, interestingly, we've chosen Washington, the state of Washington, due to their population size, their demographics are very similar, their comorbidities, their lifestyle, if you will, the disease in that state, and also that they had spiked about the same time that we did. And they're also doing about the same level of testing. And when you put these numbers, Colorado and Washington, side by side and overlay them, what you see is we're actually tracking very closely to the state of Washington. And the reason why we're tracking that particularly is when we overlay it is they're about 3 weeks ahead of us into the changes they have made in terms of their restrictions and loosening those restrictions. And as you can see, even as much as up till a couple of days ago, we are almost right on track with the same number. So for us, it's just an indication that, yes, we're seeing a surge. Should we expect to see it continue? And it's just validation that if we look across the country, we clearly do see that the state of Washington continues to increase. They're up closer to 700 a day, and we're tracking pretty closely to them. Let's take a look particularly at Southwest Colorado, though. We look at Southwest Colorado a little bit broader than just La Plata County. We're going as far north as Montrose. We're going to the west towards Cortez, and obviously out east towards Pagosa. So we try to encompass that because we're the referral center for that geographic area. And we really want to know what's happening in the service area that we're going to be covering, particularly in our ability to handle sick patients when they come in. So to date, we're running at about 301 confirmed cases. As you can see, it has begun to spike as well. We were down at about 1 to 1.5 new COVID patients in this region per day. We're now, last week moved to 5.3, and in the last 7 days, we're now at 5.7 new cases per day in this area. So again, a concern that the cases continue to go up. We're also been tracking this obviously since April the 20th and have been projecting this out. So from our projections and how we've continued to reformat and look at them, we're tracking pretty close to our projections since June 1st. So we're feeling pretty good in terms of the accuracy of the projections, and so we don't anticipate a need to change our thinking there. When we look at ICU admissions, and we look at two things, our overall ICU use for non-COVID patients, and then COVID patients on top of that. And as you can see here, our COVID patients just in the since the 25th of June has really started to increase, and we are at an all-time high right now in our ICU. As a matter of fact, due to staffing, and this is an important point, we have 23 ICU beds. However, due to our ability to staff those, find the ICU nurses and have them here, we're actually at capacity today. And we continue to scour the entire state and beyond to find additional ICU nurses. But even though we have the capacity to surge to those 23 beds beyond the 5 to 6 COVID patients that we're treating in those units today, having the staff to do that is where the challenge is. And so today we are literally at capacity. When we look at our vent capacity, due to the patients who are on, we have 5 patients who are on vents as we speak today, actually 6 patients. So we continue to see a rise in the number of COVID patients on vents. At the hospital, we are not at capacity here. However, it does continue to increase, and that certainly is alarming for us. This is the highest level we have seen in the entire pandemic period. On top of the fact that COVID is increasing, our overall census has continued. We're at a high level today, and we continue to see sicker and sicker patients coming in. So part of it could be a delay in the patients who over the last several months have delayed their care and now coming in sicker. It could be just time of year. However, the combination of those two is leading to a capacity challenge for us at the hospital. We are able to handle sick patients today. It's the ICU, which is a really challenging area for us. When we look across at what's going to be influencing our future, we look at San Juan County specifically. And so as you can see on this slide, there's about 2,700 confirmed cases in San Juan County. When we look at their surge, they have actually also increased. So they've increased from 21 to 24 new cases per day. So a slight increase in the last week. When we look at the Navajo Nation, which is very close to us, obviously, there's 16,000 plus confirmed cases there. Again, another increase in the average daily cases from 166 per day to 179 cases per day. When we look at the entire state of New Mexico is experiencing today a second wave of surging. They were down at the 150 level only a few weeks ago. They jumped up to 207 in the last 7-day period or previous 7-day period. And then in the last 7 days, they're up to 253 per day. So clearly they are surging as well. And as you know, the state of Arizona and many Arizonans and Texans do come to Durango for their tourist activities. The other thing is you go around town, I'm sure you see a lot of Arizona and Texas plates. So as we give you a look of what's happening in Texas, they continue to increase. We call it, it's slowed, but we're talking about slowing from an already high number of cases per day of 3,454 to now 3,484 in the last 7 days. So it's starting to tail off from their surge, but it is still excessively high. And when we look at Texas as a state who is coming to visit us, they are growing exponentially. They are literally out of control from the standpoint of number of new cases per day. Both of these states, Texas and Arizona, have run out of their healthcare capacity to take care of this. They're struggling very, very much. They have reached out to the state of Colorado and to many healthcare providers to try to get assistance, and they continue to increase the number of new cases per day. So we track the reopening and our moves very closely with San Juan Basin Health Department and the governor's office and the changes. We were in what we would call low risk up until recently, but as of July 12th, that was moved to moderate risk, primarily due to the challenge of we're now at or will be exceeding our capacity in ICU. So overall, from a summary standpoint, from a state level, Colorado's in moderate increases in growth. Arizona's got moderate and growing. I would say theirs is actually very high, but it has started to tail off. Texas is exponential. New Mexico exponential. Overall, the regions that we're monitoring, Southwest Colorado, moderate growth. San Juan has moderate growth, and Navajo Nation moderate growth, and then overall, our key metrics is we're still, like I mentioned, in what we would call the moderate risk and due to the capacity challenges. And then we've got, a great job in terms of green, a phenomenal job being done on the testing side throughout all of the community with a 97.5 cases. So with that said, that's my report for today.
Michael, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate everything that you're doing for us, and there's some things you can control and some things you can't, and I think the things that you can, you guys are doing an exceptional job at, especially at testing. So thank you so much.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We're running just a couple of minutes behind, but so we'll quickly jump into school reopenings. So we'll start with Dr. Striticus. Tom, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. I'll try to do this in 3 minutes. So in the chat, I've put our website, Gear Up FLC, which includes information around campus life, campus learning, campus health. You can dive into our plans there. First of all, we were highlighting a couple things. This is about being nimble and flexible. We have a plan, that we've developed, but we're tracking very closely with Mike Murphy and the folks at San Juan Basin Public Health, so that we are clear about how to adjust if needed. We will have in-person class instruction. About 15% of our offerings will be online. Masks will be required. The evidence around mask transmission, particularly for young adults, really as young as probably 13, 14, kind of post-puberty, looks to be good. So masks will be required. It'll be part of our student conduct code if students aren't wearing any face covering. A couple changes that folks should be aware of. We're working to de-densify our residence halls. So quads are becoming doubles, doubles are becoming singles. We're also in the process of contracting with a local hotel to ensure that we have surge space if we need it as well. And then lastly, probably a change for people. We won't be having, in-person campus events. People are used to using our ballroom and our concert hall. Those will become classroom spaces because by the state of Colorado rules, we're limited to 50% capacity in our existing rooms. So, room and turn it into a classroom of 20, giving us ample opportunity to do the physical distancing that we need. We're out lastly on the comms front. I work with college age students, so we have some good snarky memes and other kind of social media about wearing masks, about personal responsibility, and we'll continue to push those out. Happy to share those with anybody as well. And I think that, the thing that Brian and Mike are both sharing that does raise some concern for us is turnaround time for testing. We had worked with Mike and Cedar Diagnostics on some good plans there. We will continue to reevaluate what the implications of the slowed testings and potentially slowed supply chain is for our plan. So it's about nimbleness and personal responsibility. And with that, I'll try to make up some time on the agenda and turn it over to Dan, I think.
Thank you, Tom. Briefly, before we go to Dan, if the panelists would look at both chat and Q&A, we're getting questions from both platforms. So if you can put your questions into Q&A, that way we sort of move to a single source. Dan?
Great, thanks. I'm going to keep my camera off just so that we can keep the sound quality going. Do want to let everyone know Colorado Department of Education is our regulatory agency. They're the ones who provide us guidance on what we can and can't do with regard to reopening. And we are expecting some new guidance released tomorrow, which will further shape our plans. I know people want to know what's the plan. We have a lot in the works and we're ready to pivot, but we also need to recognize that we're 40 plus days out from start of our school year. And we've got to be nimble because, as we've seen in the presentation from Michael, things are definitely changing pretty rapidly. So our job as a school district is to make sure we're ready to open. The hottest topic right now has been masks or no masks. We've been told up to this point that masks are strongly encouraged for children. To Tom's point, certainly 13 and above is certainly scientifically shown that masks are beneficial. We have some young children that masks actually cause greater challenges for. So we are carefully working our way through that. We have heard that likely CDE's guidance released tomorrow may change that position. We do have a challenge in public education that children do have a right to a free appropriate public education. And there's been a lot of conversation on the legal front as to whether we can force and require a young child to wear a mask. Honestly, our job is to educate kids, and I think all of us would agree that spending money on legal challenges is probably not where we want to put our resources. However, we want to do the right thing for our community. So know that we receive some pretty harsh emails on all sides of the spectrum. Our job is to make sure that we serve kids to the best degree possible this coming year to educate them. We also recognize that kids being safely at school allows parents to engage in their work. And we know that that's a key part of our economic engine here in La Plata County. Our approach right now is to develop multiple options to support families. Again, we have families across the spectrum on their fear and anxiety regarding COVID. And honestly, our job is to make sure we have a model that meets their needs, We will offer 3 models of learning in the fall. We'll offer in person to the degree that we're allowed to, based upon the safeguards we're directed to put into place. We will offer a blended model, which allows children the opportunity of coming to school a couple of days a week in a smaller setting with less children, greater social distancing. And we'll offer remote learning to children whose parents really feel that, maybe they have compromised immune systems at home, they have older members of their household, and they don't want to take that risk. So we are working hard to make sure we have models that will meet the needs of parents across the spectrum. We also are working to make sure that all of those models are equally rigorous. I will just say right up front, our remote learning, while I think our teachers did an amazing job in a very short period of time, it was not as rigorous as it needs to be to make up for missing in-person instruction. Our goal in the fall is to make sure that all 3 of those models are equally rigorous and that kids can pivot. We know that kids may not start in school, but a parent may get to that comfort level, and we want to make sure that student can seamlessly move in our models to make sure that we meet the needs of our families. We are setting up community meetings on August 6th and 7th. I'm going to encourage any of you who are parents or any of you who are just interested. At that point, we will have a plan that will be implemented. We believe that's close enough to the start of the school year that what we put into place will be supported by our current numbers and our current science. And so we will offer morning, noon, and evening sessions to just allow a full disclosure of that plan so that parents can understand. And then we're going to ask them to commit to one of those 3 models by the end of the day on Monday, August 10th, so that we can plan accordingly and make sure we have teachers prepared to serve them in those variety of roles. Overall, enrollment is a huge issue for the school district. Children not coming to school causes less resources overall. We are watching very carefully. We plan for a 200 student down number for the coming year. If that actually increases, we will have to do some quick budget adjustments, as all of you are certainly familiar with. In the business world, we are a business. And finally, let me just say, we recognize that kids in school or childcare is a key factor to our economic function of our community, and we'll continue to follow all possible pathways to provide one or both to allow the economic engine of our community to function safely and at its greatest capacity. So again, I encourage you to watch. DurangoSchools.org is our website, and as we roll out our plan, it'll be up there. And again, your feedback is appreciated. I love engaging in dialogue. It makes us stronger. Hopefully it can be positive dialogue. We're certainly looking for a lot more of that. So thanks for the opportunity, Michael, for presenting today. Happy to also watch the Q&A box and the chat box.
Dan, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I really appreciate all you do for the community. Again, if you have questions for any of our panelists, including Dan, please go to the Q&A box, and those will be answered by the panelists. Next up is Dr. Kevin.
Ayton, you can go ahead, say it. Go ahead. It's
Dr.
4 letters.
Ayton.
I'm an English teacher, so a vowel followed by a consonant followed by E is always a long, so it's Ayton. So good morning. Again, thank you, Michael, for this opportunity to speak to everybody about the great work going on in the Bayfield School District. Dan covered a little bit of it in that we know that we're going to get supposedly extra guidance tomorrow. I'm worried they're going to kick it to next week, but we are going to get extra guidance tomorrow from the Colorado Department of Education about opening schools. The eastern end of La Plata County, I think, is in a little bit different situation, and I think we can acknowledge that. You don't have to look far to see the town data that the Bayfield, that Bayfield town put out. Our families overwhelmingly want children back in school, and we overwhelmingly agree with them. I have a board that overwhelmingly feels that way. We know that keeping kids out and these fits and starts and stuff is not going to be best. So we feel like that we really need to get kids back in school. We've had student athletes out working all June into July in pods, outdoor pods, mostly of 24-to-1 with coaches, and the community has been overwhelmingly supportive of that, and we've had absolutely no issues. we've taken the leadership on that. Durango, Pagosa also have student athletes out working, and we feel like that's been a very successful entry back in to what we do. We've had concerns a little bit from, we have a K2, a 3-5, a 6-8, and a 9-12 building. The 6 through 9-12, the grade 6 through 9 people would like their children and their students to be back in class. We've had some concerns with K2. One of the options that the governor put money into was CDLS, Colorado Digital Learning Solution Systems, and we're going to partner with them. Our plan is to allow people who want to do, and we've had very few inquiries, but if they want to do online, they can do that through CDLS. We have a really good, unique relationship with them. Our high school principal is on their board. And so between, Dan Morris, their director, and with Leon Hanhart being on their board, we get excellent service. We feel like that's going to be the best easy entry. I think people are going to start online and realize that spring this was very hard, and then we're going to see them migrate back to school, and we're going to welcome them with open arms. Our enrollments have been exceptional. We are planning to be up 50 kids. We feel like we will easily meet that mark right now, unless there's, depending on really what happens in the economy. And we've actually been able to accept some kids in open enrollment, especially at the secondary level and especially at high school. So we feel very strongly right now that our enrollments are in a pretty good way. That could all change in a heartbeat, and that could all change depending on what happens. And that's why I read in the chat that it's good that Fort Lewis is up. We also have a Pueblo Community College site on one of our campuses, and their enrollment has not been up, but they have pledged to go ahead and continue what they're doing on our campuses. And I think that's a really boon for all of us as well, to know that our students have access to higher ed. We'll be coming out with guidance. I have a school board meeting next Tuesday. We've kicked that far enough to be able to plan for our guidance. As we wait for the Colorado Department of Education and to get that out to the community by the middle of next week. But overall, we feel like that we do not have the problems that other places do. A lot of the guidance has been around class sizes of 25. We have very few classes over 25. This is where being smaller allows us to be more flexible, more nimble, and we actually have very few classes. Band and choir are the exception. And those are certainly concerning because there's lots of spit flying around in those. But other than that, the rest of our classes are below 25. We actually feel like in our facilities, we can do some social distancing. We can keep our cohorts together, much like we've done with the athletes. We can do lunch in the classroom at the elementary initially, and that we can keep kids divided up and do what we need to do to keep them safe. Our biggest issue is the bus. And the initial guidance that came out from CDC for the bus was quite frankly ridiculous. To put 10 kids on a 77 passenger bus in a district that's 30 miles wide is simply not possible. And there are certainly not drivers enough to run 3 or 4 or 5 buses to the north end of Vicedo. So we're hearing how districts are handling in various and sundry ways, requiring masks. That one's going to be a little more of a tough pickle for us as we go along because a lot of our students are bused. But that's that one we'll keep working through. But again, we'll have our information on our website hopefully by the middle of next week. And again, Michael and my colleagues, Dan and Tom, thank you for your literally heroic work that's been going on since March 12th. And I appreciate this. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to shift the gear a little bit. And Chuck, I know you've got a hard stop here in a few minutes, but thank you for taking the time and talking about the land use code from the staff's perspective. Chuck?
All right, good morning, everyone. I'll be as brief as I can. I don't know if I'm going to get us back on track, though, but I'll see what I can do. First of all, thanks for allowing me to come into this forum and speak about the land use code, because as many of you know, the current land use code, the one that we operate under today in La Plata County, has not been updated in literally decades. A complete revision of that has not happened. And in spite of multiple attempts to do that. And I think it's important that we talk about that in this forum, especially because the The reason that the Board of County Commissioners has taken on this initiative and has made it their #1 priority for the past 4 years, because that's where we are with this current attempt to rewrite the land use code, is it's about 4 years in the making. The reason why the board is so committed to this is largely because of input from this community and the business community, members of the chamber, the Realtors Association, Home Builders Association, and developers at large. The current code is broken. You can't have a code that's been in place for decades, and we've done changes and amendments, and every time you do that, you try to fix one area, you break another area. And what we have ended up with over time is a code that is completely non-functional. Many of you in the development community know this. It is not unrealistic for a development project to enter the planning process in La Plata County and take a year or more to move through that process. Literally, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars being expended to get that project through, only to get to the very end of the project for a compatibility determination to find out that under the current code, the project is not deemed compatible and the project cannot move forward. That just simply is a broken system. You can't ask a developer to spend that much time and that much money without some kind of certainty about whether or not the development is going to move forward. And so one of the goals that the board gave the staff with this attempt to rewrite it is to fix that. And so we have, and I believe that we have, and I'm going to walk through some of the work that we've done, the timeline, and really how you can help, because if anything today, I'm here to ask you, now is the time. This has been a process 4 years in the making, but we are literally at the point now where we need to hear your voice, and we need you to come out in force and speak and provide feedback on this land use code. This has been a long time in the making, but I'm very, very excited. Here we are in mid-July, and if we stay on track and continue to progress, in about 60 days or so, I hope to see a brand new code adopted in La Plata County, something that hasn't happened, again, literally in decades. So in January of this year, again, for the last 2.5, 3 years, following the fairgrounds meeting that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, some of you probably attended, the board heard loud and clear from the community. There was no desire for La Plata County to move forward with Euclidean zoning, which was the proposal at the time. And the board heard that. And the board effectively took 2 years or more, a little more than 2 years off to reach out to the community, talk to the constituents, and find out what was important to them with regard to a land use code. And they listened, and they went out into the community, they talked to people, they talked to developers, they talked to the business community, and they tried to figure out what's important for the land use code, because we want to make sure we get it right. So in January of this year, one of the criticisms that we heard was that there seemed to be a disconnect between the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission, that they weren't on the same sheet of music as we were moving through the last attempt to rewrite the land use code. So one of the things that we did to resolve that was we scheduled a series of joint work sessions wherein the board and the Planning Commission came together to talk about the code and give policy guidance and direction directly to the staff. So we started those in January, and those have continued all the way through July of this year. In late January, early February, we presented a table of contents and went on a roadshow. Staff went on a roadshow throughout the county. That doesn't seem like a big deal. Maybe you're like, great, table of contents, who cares? Our current code doesn't have a table of contents. If you go and pick up our current code, which is about 400 pages long, you are literally flipping through pages looking for whatever information you're trying to find, and you have no compass or map to help you get there. So when we decided to rewrite this code, we said, we've got to start from scratch. We're going to make a code that is user-friendly. One of our goals was, we want a code that anybody can pick up, anybody can navigate, anybody can use, and you don't have to go get a land use agent to try and help you push your project through if you have a very simple project. So we organized our table of contents, and we went on the road, and we went out into the community. We're not Durango centric. This is La Plata County, and that's another criticism that we heard loud and clear. So staff went on a roadshow. We went to the Grange halls throughout the unincorporated La Plata County to connect with the people in their backyards to find out what's important to them and to start the dialogue. Again, we did that in late February, started in January, and started the roadshow in late February. On May 11th, I'm very, very proud to say that version 1 was released of our code. And I know I'm biased, but I'll tell you what, it's a pretty darn good code, and I'm incredibly proud of it. I'm incredibly proud of the effort that staff put into writing it. We wrote it in-house. We heard through the last attempt to write the code that our community did not want outsiders. We did not want consultants to come into our community and write a code to try and apply to our community. So we wrote it in-house. And let me tell you, that is not something that you find across the nation unless there's a dedicated department or staff that does nothing but write codes all year long. To carve out staff capacity on top of everything else that was going on, to include now a global pandemic, was incredibly challenging. But I think the product was well worth it. And I invite you, if you haven't read the code, I strongly encourage you to go take a look at it, because I do think it hit our goals of making it user-friendly. And we've attempted to streamline many, many processes. And the most important, I think, is trying to move that compatibility determination from the back end all the way to the very front. So now a developer, if you have a project, we're trying to get you that answer up front before you spend all the time, before you spend all the money to do a water engineering test or a traffic study or whatever the case may be. We want to get the compatibility piece up front so that hopefully you know with some certainty that your project is going to move forward and the outcome is going to be yes. We also heard that there was a desire to have a professional facilitator come in and facilitate some of the community engagement. So we actually went out an open bid process. We invited members of the public to sit in on the procurement process with the county. We did not select this vendor, this facilitator in a vacuum. We invited people from the community to come in and be a part of the panel to help us select a facilitator. But we selected a facilitator and we did 12 sessions to present the code, answer questions, and to solicit feedback. And all of those recordings are online. So I put in the chat already the land use code revision project planning page. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, all 12 of those work sessions are online. And while you won't be able to ask your questions directly of the facilitator or the planning staff, when you watch it, you can at least see the presentation and you can hear the questions that were answered. So even if you're late to the game, you can still get caught up pretty quickly. So we've incorporated input and feedback from the public since version 1. We've got lots and lots of comments, and we have read, reviewed, and considered every single one of those comments and incorporated many of them. And I won't get into detail about that, but not every comment is going to get incorporated. If you submit a comment that says, hey, I like what you're doing with performance-based zoning, but Euclidean zoning is the way to go. Well, okay, I appreciate your comment, but the board made a policy decision 2 years ago that we were not going to move forward with Euclidean zoning. And so I've got your comment, but that doesn't mean that we're going to rewrite the code to accommodate your comment. So we've got everything. Staff has read it. It's all going to be part of the public record that gets presented to the board. And just because your comment didn't make it into version 2 doesn't mean we didn't hear it, doesn't mean we didn't read it. So version 2 was released last week on Monday, on July 6th. That's a red line version so that you can go through and see exactly what was changed and what modifications were made. And in about 48 hours from now, the very first public hearing on the new land use code is going to take place with the Planning Commission. That's going to be at 6 p.m. It's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a limited in-person meeting in the boardroom, or you can stream it online using Zoom, or you can stream it online using our normal platforms. But our first public hearing on the land use code is going to take place at 6 p.m. this Thursday. When I say limited in person, we have to comply with social distancing requirements just like everybody else. So our boardroom, which normally has a capacity of about 200 people, when you do the measuring, we're down to about 20 seats. So after we fill those seats and you want to make public comment, we have opportunities for you to do that, but it's going to be a one in, one out policy at that point. In order to get the word out and make sure that we're communicating as best we can, last week we sent out a press release. We saw that the Herald ran an article on that press release. That was great. We appreciate that. We're also beginning print ads, which are going to run in both the Herald and the Telegraph beginning this week. Radio ads are going to begin this week as well. We're boosting on social media. And we're going to continue this advertising. It's going to run all the way through August. And I'll tell you why August is important in just a second, and into September. In addition to that, we have a planning newsletter that goes to about 1,400 recipients, and those are direct recipients. Some of you on this call today are probably direct recipients, but your organizations also then do us a favor by distributing those internal to your organizations. So for example, if Mike French gets that email and then he distributes it to the Alliance membership, we get broader outreach, and we know that that occurs not only with Alliance, but with the Chamber, with the Realtors Association, the home builders, et cetera. And so we appreciate that. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of ways to provide public comment. We know it's a global pandemic. We know not everybody's comfortable with Zoom and using a virtual platform, but you know what? You can handwrite a note. You can drop it off in my building. I will get it in the record, and I'll do it in a safe manner, but we will get it into the record. We will get it in front of the board. You can attend the public hearings in person, limited capacity, but you can attend in person. You can send email. You can write a letter. You can post online via our portal. You can pick up a telephone, a regular old telephone, and call in, or if you're comfortable with Zoom, you can participate with Zoom. And finally, you can always meet with your commissioner during office hours. The commissioners continue to have office hours, and you can always meet with them there. So in August, on August 4th and August 11th, the Board of County Commissioners is going to have their hearings. Those sessions are going to be split. There'll be one in the afternoon. There'll be one in the evening. The afternoon session will run from 2 to 4. The evening session will run from 6 to 8. Again, those will be a hybrid. They'll be limited in person. Once we hit our capacity of 20 in the boardroom, we'll be on a 1 in, 1 out at that point. But you can always stream it online, or you can always participate via Zoom. So I really encourage all of you, especially this group at this point, to please begin to engage, read the code, and reach out and communicate your perspective on the code. Again, I know I'm biased. I think it's a really good code. The feedback that I'm getting, the people that I'm talking to, I know that we didn't get everything exactly right, but I think we got a lot of it right. And I welcome your feedback. That's all I have. Thanks again, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity.
Chuck, thank you. And the Alliance will certainly continue to work with your staff and in reviewing the drafts all the way up until the final version. And thank you to your staff for meeting with us on a continuous basis. We had a question about the presentation. We are streaming it live, and we'll have a recording on Facebook that we'll send out to everybody. We are going to run a little bit over for the next 15, 20 minutes. We'll just do municipality updates, and I'll start with our Commissioner Clyde Church. Clyde.
Good morning, Michael. Just want to chime in and let everybody know that we really do listen, as Chuck said. From version 1 to version 2, the red line that Chuck mentioned, I did an informal averaging of the number of red marks per page. And it looks like there's somewhere between 500 and 600 changes in the red line version going from version 1 to version 2. So we are listening, we are implementing, we are finding things, and that includes things anywhere from paragraphs to periods. And we're modifying as we go and learning as we go and listening. Just want to say the county is continuing full functions as we speak. Offices are open on a limit basis. We do have an extensive work at home program going if your jobs do allow it. And but offices of the assessor at the ACT building are open on a limited basis. Please call, an appointment would be appreciated. We're continuing to maintain staff levels. We are up 6 people this last month and this last week, maintaining and working from home. And our absentee rate is very moderate. We have 6 out right now, either due to contact, symptoms, or testing positive for COVID. We have 22 people. These are people that need a place to stay because they maybe tested positive and can't stay at home with a person that's in the threatened category with health issues. Our expenditures will continue. 2020 budget is solid. We're continuing on with that and possibly may underrun it slightly. Don't know until we get to the end. It's always a mystery till the books close. This is the beginning of budget season, and We anticipate a fully functioned county moving into the next 2021 with a robust budget as we have this year. Might mention, we have a number of people that are concerned about detainees at the jail and their health, and the employees of the staff at the jail. Today we have 122 inmates, which is down from 201 prior to the beginning of the pandemic, which is excellent news. It gives us more latitude to react. That population includes inmates from Archuleta County that we're housing until the end of the year. We have 2 possible confirmed or exposed inmates. They're isolated in quarantine. We have no positive staff on site. We had a couple that were possible, but they're staying at home. So with that, Mike, the county's healthy. We're moving ahead. We're hiring. We're continuing capital budgets, and we're continuing to provide service. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Barbara Noseworthy.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to be brief as well. I think the big news is that the City Council unanimously put forward 2 names for finalists in our search for city manager. They are Jose Madrigal, and that's spelled M-A-D-R-I-G-A-L, and Kevin Knutson, and that's spelled K-N-U-T-S-O-N. Mr. Madrigal has experience as the deputy manager and the interim city manager in McKinney, Texas. He's been the assistant city manager in Irving and Cedar Park, Texas. He currently is a supervisor of the Solid Waste Services Department for the city of Irvine. And he has budget experience. While he was at McKinney in particular, he managed a $112 million budget and had finance responsibility for a $470 million budget. Mr. Knutson is the Vice President of Planning and Performance Solutions at Invisio Solutions. He's worked with over 100 government clients in this role with strategic planning, budget issues, board development training, and problem solving. He has 10 years of he's been 10 years of experience where he's been responsible for budgets between 135 million and 650 million. He also was the assistant city manager and interim city manager for Reno, Nevada. And during that time, during the financial crisis, starting in 2008, he was responsible for implementing the budget reductions that totaled 27 million. Both of these finalists, they have profiles on LinkedIn, so you can go in and look at that. Council is working to arrange a schedule for the interview process and how we will do that in this time of COVID, where we can seek public input, and we'll be putting that forward very soon. I will also indicate that we have about roughly nine candidates who have applied. No candidate has been ruled out, and we will continue to take applications until the filled. So these are 2 finalists. And I think it's important to recognize that there was a unanimous support in naming their names and bringing them forward. On the COVID situation, I did want the mask situation. First of all, I wanted to thank our presenters today. That was really useful information. And it's really important for elected officials to have that kind of information as we think about what else we need we can be doing. The mask enforcement has been an issue for some time, and both the City Council and the Board and the Commissioners jointly discussed the issues around enforcement. And I just wanted to say that we're going to be focusing on education and to motivate voluntary compliance, but we also have to solve logistical challenges with this compliance and guidance to our enforcement officers. The main issues I think right now will be businesses, focusing on businesses open without authority, exceeding density guidelines, and interacting with customers, businesses that are interacting with customers in an unapproved or unsafe manner. We'll also have signage. We'll have a new banner going over Main Avenue, encouraging or talking about responsible visitation to Durango and wearing a mask. And masks will be available in the Welcome Center. So those are some of the steps we're taking. We're still looking at increased efforts to have compliance with regard to wearing a mask. And that's all I have, Michael.
Thank you, Councillor Noseworthy. Appreciate your time this morning. Mayor Tarkington?
Hi, yes. Hi, everybody. Bayfield is still very much business as usual. Sales tax is still trending upward nicely for us. Everything is open. I signed quite a few business licenses in the last couple of weeks. It's nothing in the brick and mortar area, but a lot of cottage or home-based businesses, I think more a side hustle kind of business, which I think we'll see the trend more and more. So I just think people are getting creative to get by. As a town board, we are also going through the mask issue. I have reached out to county commissioners, and Barbara, thank you for your time with me. We are dealing with the same compliance issues and enforcement issues, and I think we are going to team up and try to come from a point of education and try to get some more of our community members on board with compliance. And so it's been a really tough battle for us out in Bayfield, but we will persevere. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. Trustee Sharon Craig.
Hey, good morning. I want to thank the panelists as well and the information they shared. Ignacio, our sales tax as well is looking good. And, you know, with keeping a watch over our spending, we don't foresee any problems in our budget. Some good news, we've received award notice for 2 different grant applications. One is broadband planning. The other is our Rock Creek development planning. And so we'll be moving forward with DOLA to work with those contractors and get those moving forward. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Sharon. That concludes our meeting. If you have any additional questions, please go ahead and type those in, as panelists will hang out for just a minute. Our next meeting will be August 11th. We'll continue to do a virtual meeting, and we'll publish that agenda a few days before the 11th. Again, thank you for attending. The entire meeting will be online, and we will publish that link. Will be on our Facebook link. Have a great day.